Warning, this video will spoil the entire game. Good evening. Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make. I, was a hipster many years ago, but I have been burdened with this curse. For eternity I'm stuck reviewing games. It is revolting. I thought I reached some sort of limbo, because after doing this for so long I thought I ran out of games to review. But I thought there must be something out there, something for me to love, something that will make worth living an eternity for, because anybody that's capable of love is capable of being saved. But no, I cannot talk about it. I cannot review it, for I am a monster. Look at me. Look at me. Ah, yes. Tween vampires. I was looking up an abandonware website to find horror games to play for this month. I was looking at screenshots and was like, well, this looks like a very silly FMV game. If you look at my channel, well, you'd know that those types of games are my jam. After playing the game for a while, I talked to my partner about it. I mentioned the title of this, Vampire Diaries, to them, and the response was, oh god, please don't play it. It turns out that this is some absolutely huge book and TV series? Well, that only piqued my interest in this, and I kinda went down the rabbit hole, mostly by reading synopses of Wikipedia and watching Jenny Nicholson's 2.5 hour long video on it. It's funny, cause she actually talked about the game for a while too. However, FMV games are more my type. So, was it something I enjoyed, or should I leave it in the sun to die? Stay tuned to find out.
Who's that pointing and clicking his way to internet fame? You might be a little too cool for your mainstream kind of games. But if you like retro consoles and obscure PC stuff, then you might just be hip enough for this pretentious hipster.
Upon seeing that 2.5 hour long summary, I kind of feel obligated to at least talk about the series a bit, at least from what I've learned, so that you can know, if you're a fan of the show, how this actually applies to it. But first we should talk about the background of this game. This was made by Her Interactive Inc. and published by American Laser Games. Her Interactive was actually founded as a division of American Laser Games. As quoted by the company, Her Interactive creates intelligent, interactive entertainment for girls of all ages. The company designs, develops, and markets award-winning interactive CD-ROM games that offer role-playing mysteries and adventures that girls and adventurous sleuths find both challenging and fun. Her Interactive's Nancy Drew series offers exciting adventure games to play without violence or gender stereotypes. With years of experience developing games for girls, the company will continue to identify opportunities for interactive products for girls. Our corporate mission is to lead the industry toward a new standard of intelligent, interactive entertainment for girls. By providing role-playing experiences through computer games and online media, Her Interactive's goal is to open the doors of technology to girls
by making computers more appealing.
And like, that seems a bit weird. I mean, most women gamers just play games that everyone else plays. I don't know why they catered it like that.
It's funny, because Her Interactive actually became quite huge. Their first game, Mackenzie & Co., was quite successful, so they got the rights to make a game for this, which was just a book trilogy made from the early 90s at the time. This game, however, had lower production funds. That will be apparent when you see the game itself, and only 5,000 copies of the game were made as well. So yeah, this is obviously super expensive. Aside from the price of this, I found a funny fact that during E3 they teamed up with the Red Cross for a blood bank. Donate blood and get a free copy of one of the books. However, their success lied later on. They ended up getting the rights for Nancy Drew, which I'm sure plenty of you have heard of the game series. They are highly successful and apparently quite fun. The funny thing is, the main division, American Laser Games, ended up being bought by the Her Interactive subdivision. So, I think it's time to talk about the plot of this game now, and how it compares to the TV show and possibly the books. You play as Elena, who never shows her face. She's between her junior and senior year in high school and lives with her Aunt Judith.
This one did it in kind of a weird way. I mean, if you're gonna do a first-person point-and-click game, you're not really gonna have dialogue options or anything like that because they want to immerse you into it. Pretend that you are becoming the character. When they do this direction with dialogue choices, they basically just go third person and show the character.
You go to this, I guess, formal party. You then meet two hunks, Stefan and Damon. What is the difference between them? It's quite easy.
Okay, why don't we move on? This is a test to see if you can see differences.
This one's easy.
Uh-huh.
They're both hunks. Check, please.
You then get introduced to the other characters. There's your best friend Bonnie, who is very interested in the supernatural, and there are twists to her ancestry. She's working a summer job with someone named Gary Richards. He houses a very huge collection of so-called magic items. This party is in an art gallery owned by Mikhail Romanov.
Where are you from, Mr. Romanov? That accent is definitely not from Richmond or Washington.
I am from Russia.
He's a recent immigrant from Russia, and as one description said, he has clear blue eyes and blonde hair which adds to his mystique.
Talk about to die for. Have you seen Mikhail Romanov, the host of tonight's party? Oh, he's got to be the most terminally attractive guy I have ever seen.
Everyone wants him. His receptionist is Caroline. They have been close friends since kindergarten, but something changed. She now despises you.
Feel free to look around, though I doubt you have the money or the taste to buy anything here.
I'm sorry. Your tone implies that I'm actually supposed to care.
There's also someone who works at a boarding house and is the unofficial caretaker of the cemetery named Mrs. Flowers. You then meet your family members, Aunt Judith, and your 4-year-old little sister Margaret. As you're all chatting, there's eventually a scream. In the back room, Margaret ends up being attacked by a bat, and then she ends up in the hospital. Your job is to find the purpose of the attacks. So now, Stefan is probably the one you want to meet the most. He's the polite and quiet guy, and works at the hospital as a physician's assistant. The twist is obvious. I mean, he says it early on.
Sweet Elena. I'm a vampire, not a seer.
And you know what? Working at a hospital makes sense for a vampire. I understand that most fans are Team Damon. There is some consistency in this. He's 20 in the game, but the actor is 30. I heard that the actor on the show is in his late 30s near the end of the show's lifespan, and plays around the same age. However, we will almost never see him in the game, so prepare to be disappointed if you are Team Damon.
Considering who made this, and the period that it's in, and the subject matter, I should talk about what I grew up with. A long time ago, when I was your age. And I mean a very long time ago.
There was Queen of the Damned, a sequel to Interview with a Vampire. Seeing it now, It is so gloriously bad and entertaining that I would actually recommend it to tweens today. It would especially be surreal for people to see what was hip back then. He wakes up in a century-long slumber because of gorgeous music. What type of music? Nu metal. It was a movement in the late 90s and early 2000s of metal with chuggy riffs, a member that usually plays at turntables, and adding a hip-hop flair with frankly terrible vocalists who can't rap nor scream. Which is why most of the background music is alternative or nu metal. So, Lestat apparently has the most gorgeous voice ever, and he becomes the vocalist of the biggest band. A musician dubs the voice, and who is it? Jonathan Davis from Korn.
Yeah, Jonathan Davis from Korn. The one that does that sort of weird beatboxing with his flourishes. Boom, boom, boom.
I've rarely had so much fun with a bad film. The two leads are quite attractive as well. And in fact, the lead Alia died before the film came out, so that was the focus of the film's release. It's funny because this one actually seemed to be more for people who are attracted to women because of Alia, but I guess with Stuart Townsend it works both ways. I'd highly recommend it.
It's actually hilarious because the initial trilogy of books and this game, I was like 5 years old when this game came out, so this is kind of older than when I was your age type of thing, so it didn't really make sense to do that.
Another recommendation I would make, if you love overdramatic vampires, to please see Bloodstone Subspecies 2. It's got this weird mix of being so bad it's good and legit good at the same time. Its style and cinematography is fantastic, reminiscent of Italian horror films, but the acting is atrocious. However, I loved it because of that, especially Radu. He is the most pathetic and overdramatic vampire, but in the best way possible. The director did do a spin-off called Vampire Journals, which was a bit underwhelming, but it's pretty much a tween vampire fanfic coming to life. Anyways, back to the game. For adventure fans, I'd say that this game is incredibly similar to the masterpiece Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within. The only major difference being that this is a first-person game instead. Both are more dialogue-based, and it tends to go to a similar pacing in my book. I mean, listen to the scores of both of them. If I did a blind test with them, at least before the vocals come into the Vampire Diaries one, I'm sure I would be unable to tell which is which. Gabriel Knight 2 did come out a bit before this, so it would make sense if it was a huge inspiration to this to the point that it's a clone. This is where the gameplay of Vampire Diaries really falls apart. It goes for that 360-degree view that many adventure games go for, which is of course fine, but look what happens when I just start spinning around. Depending on what is there, the camera moves up or down. Now, I never have motion sickness from a game, but seeing this made me feel really uncomfortable. This makes it show the flaw for the hotspots as well, but it might just be because I was being an idiot. As well as going 360 degrees around, you can also look up and down at every point. I have never encountered a game that does both of this at once. The usual ones tend to make navigation in certain positions, so you can see the hotspots either way down or high up, but with this I had to fight against that instinct, partially spin around, look up and down, and then repeat. Of course, going up or down is how I trigger most events, or find objects, so it made me quite lost near the beginning. Navigating through certain areas can make you lost as well. For example, there's no way to exit the graveyard as you get in. The way to get out is to click at the gargoyle map on the top right corner to take you to the town map. It's an inconsistency because I think this is the only place where you have to do it, so no way will you figure that out unless you mess around. I will discuss more gameplay aspects later on, but the bulk of it is the dialogue. You talk to these handful of characters all the time, and then you're given some dialogue choices. The user interface of this is absolutely awful. You have to scroll through the dialogue yourself, and
Tur of belief and tur of belief and... Oh. That was a weird glitch.
And yeah, this happens in the dialogue in your response. Get ready for tons of typos. Or, the thing that is even more bothersome, which is the subtitles not matching what is said out loud.
Everybody seems so excited that we made it back from the Riviera in time for the party.
I could have swore one time the wrong dialogue option was chosen as well. Stefan has the cheesiest dialogue I've seen.
Anything I have I would gladly lend you, Elena. Even my heart.
His character is probably the most entertaining when it comes to the dialogue because of that. The surprising fact is that Elena is actually quite bitchy. But to be fair, it is the dialogue choices, so you could have chosen that. And of course I had to choose some of the more ridiculous options at times.
Sounds like the perfect person to welcome me home. Where is he?
But, look at how she says bye.
Bye.
Stop in again anytime, Elena.
Why have an attitude like that? Anyways, the quality is also terrible. Both the voice acting and the visuals itself. The only excuse they can have is the lower budget, because better looking FMV games came out years before. Even ones that probably are even more obscure than this, like Flash Traffic, which by the way I've reviewed too if you want to watch that. This does lead to dialogue trees, and it is quite risky. It's not like Gothos where if you choose the wrong option you're absolutely screwed, but if you choose the wrong options here, you will not be given certain background information, and if you're not using a walkthrough you will be totally lost on what to do. The dialogue does seem broken too. When you complete a task, those dialogue options would still come up. This does lead to some inconsistencies, but I'll explore that as you move forward with the game. Firstly, you find some background information in books. Ah yes, more pixel hunting. Hey, just like those Gabriel Knight games. At least unlike the first part, which was torture, this one has hotspots. The librarian does provide some information on this as well, but far from enough. I will say this though, make sure you spend a lot of time here. If you miss one book, you will be unable to trigger all the events and will have no idea what to do. Which is exactly what happened to me. It explores runes, the history of druids, and the Civil War, and most importantly the items required to do certain rituals. Make sure you save all of this info, write it down, or take photos with your phone, which is the standard of most point and click games anyways. Basically, it all comes down to collecting all the items required to perform the ritual. For example, you want the rune that Mikhail is selling, but obviously it will be super expensive, so you need the money. People obviously won't give you a loan, so you gotta take the matter into your own hands. Perhaps finding some treasure? Yeah, that makes sense. There is some treasure in a grave, and it makes sense that a grave is important because a ghost tries to attack you at one point. So, reading the diary, you find out that there was a couple that lost each other during the Civil War. So you need a piece of item to provide the ghost with that memory. The Civil War hat would be perfect for that in a school display, being organized by Damon. Of course, the security guard stops you, and well, he is quite extra when it comes down to this.
First you try to bust open this case, and then you tell me you need some mouldy old souvenirs to keep the killer away. What I really think you need is a tranquilizer.
So it's partially stuck at this point.
I then find out that there's a sort of timing system to this.
Time passes by either doing nothing or doing events. That I haven't figured out, but you can speed things up by sleeping in your bed. The weird part though is that sometimes it's night and I go to sleep, wake up, and it's nighttime again. Anyways, it's of course important to visit every location both at daytime and nighttime. It all makes sense now, right? Taking the Civil War hat during the nighttime. This leads to another Sierra comparison, showing that this might be a clone of Gabriel Knight 2. Someone sneaks in and catches you. Oh, it's Damon. But yes, it leads to a game over. And yes, this was the only other time I met him aside from the opening of the game. You then have to hide and then take the hat yourself. You then give it to the ghost, and a cheesy romance scene shows. I guess my point of this is to show that the crumb trail you do for this is not too bad if you are huge in adventure games. However, some of it does lead to absolute moon logic. You sneak into Gary's house to find some more treasure. You then walk forward here, but no, it's a pit. You never expect that it's there and you're gonna die. The solution? Find a hidden bookshelf here and then use a mask as a sort of bridge. How the hell would the mask even hold your weight? You then have to enter inside a painting to find a hidden room. Yup, absolute moon logic, and surprisingly difficult for a game that is aimed for teens. The weirdest part is when you find the dagger. It's the easiest puzzle ever. Shouldn't there be a difficulty progression instead? It then leads to the biggest flaw of the dialogue trees. Oh, Gary found me, and he doesn't want me to have the dagger. I guess that means he's gonna take it, right? Oh no, it's still in your inventory. The weirdest part is that this is also pretty much the only time you meet Gary aside from the opening. The only other exception is when you open the door during the daytime, and he kicks you out. With the weird navigation system, bad dialogue trees, and moon logic that ends with easier puzzles, it makes this game kind of a mess. Anyways, after you assemble all the ingredients with some twists and turns, you can do the ritual. This leads to the hardest part if you didn't write notes. The cool part though is that some of the ingredients here were used in the show, like the vervain herb. You then find out who the bad guy is. You think it would be Damon because of the game over? Nah, but they still had to make it just as obvious. You then almost get saved by the good boy Stefan, who doesn't seem to do too much to help you with this anyways, and it leads to maybe the best villain death. Stefan then meets you. My god, this is probably the worst dialogue I've seen, but very tween style of dialogue.
I gave up hope of ever finding someone centuries ago. And I met you. I didn't think we'd make it through this night, but I had to take a chance. I couldn't risk losing you.
Oh, Stefan. I thought I'd lost you. I thought he killed you.
But I let you down. I'm not worthy of your trust. I understand if you hate me. Look, I'm just gonna leave and I'm never gonna come back, okay? I'm sorry. Like the angels on the cathedral when I was a little boy. I used to stare at the faces of the stone angels for hours. And I promised myself that one day I'd marry one. So fragile and beautiful. But now I'm lost to them. To any real girl. I'm a prisoner of the night. I'm a monster.
I don't believe it. You're not a monster, Stefan. You stayed to help us, to help Margaret. You could have left. Please, Stefan. I want to be with you. Always.
And well, I'm not sure if I can recommend this. I mean, if you're a fan of the series, you might as well see how this plays out compared to the lore, but it's not really the best done adventure game. And if you're an adventure game fan, well, that point applies too. Well, I guess I had an alright time playing it though. It was amusing and it was fun going down the Vampire Diaries rabbit hole. As Elena would say, bye!